gentlemen, your presenter and facilitator for today, Tom Marcicano.
A model for individual change. How do we get the individual to change? As I said in my LinkedIn and Facebook posts, if we act like victims in times of change, we will become just that. Now is the time for us as change managers and as leaders to step up and help others deal with changes that we are facing right now. So today we're going to revisit ADKAR, and well, maybe it's a revisit for a lot of us, maybe it's a new visit for some of us, and welcome to those that are joining us for the first time, and see how we can get ADKAR to help us do just this. Before we start, I would like to share some guidance on how we can work together. We value your input and want to give everyone a chance to have their say too. So today I am assisted by Nicholas and Jovan. Nicholas will keep an eye on the chat box and answer your questions. Jovan will run our polls. So you've had the opportunities so you'll have opportunities to contribute to the session. Our polls will be run with Menti, and I think Nick may have already briefed some of you. We'll come back to that, so we'll give you lots of time to get into that. We'll work in Zoom like we're doing now, and so you can open one session on the computer and the other one on the phone, or you could just use your computer for both of those. That'll be okay too. You just switch between the tabs. All right, so to actually get in and run and give us your input, you have to just open your browser, any browser. Okay, and then you type in menti.com, enter the survey code, and the survey code is 20865 in the window, and the poll will appear when it's ready, and then you select your option and just click submit. Please don't close the tab because you'll need it for the next poll. We're going to be running a couple of these this afternoon. And then, of course, you return to Zoom, you all tab back to Zoom to get into the results. And this is ADKAR, yes, founded by Jeff Hyatt many years ago and stood the test of time. It's a simple, powerful framework to help us understand change, but to help people make sense of change. It's very results-orientated approach, and it has 5 building blocks for success at changing individuals, making sense of change. Simple, powerful, providing us the milestones, if you like, easy to explain to someone. And that's really important for us as change managers to have it easy to explain to others. And it's very powerful, especially when we start diving deeper into it and we see how this can be used in today's changes. As Nick may have mentioned to you already, we will use the interactive polling app throughout. We're showing you the first one now, and the first one is, okay, so what is your level of experience with ADKAR? Wow, people have jumped in already. Cool. Okay, some of us, this is my first experience. Okay, welcome to you. Lovely to have you here. Welcome. And we've also got some super users as well. Okay, so we have a good spread. People from all over. Okay, that's cool. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to seeing how this content comes to life and helps you bring ADKAR even more into your practice. For those of you who are the super users, you may get 1 or 2 added like insights, maybe something else you can try. And for the ones that are coming in for the first time, we'll be going through the basics with you. So we hope that you'll see the big picture here and see how ADKAR can help you. All right, so let me just start perhaps with a quote from Jean-Claude Monet, who was a person who was with Microsoft. He actually introduced ADKAR to the Microsoft Corporation, and they sort of fell in love with it. They liked it so much eventually. Now what they're actually doing is they're moving that forward to their partners, asking their partners to adopt it too, to help their clients with this kind of thing. So what did he say? Working our adoption and change management program through the ADKAR model gave us a higher degree of engagement. We were treating people differently. And that's really what this is all about, treating people differently. And the big change was that it put people at the center of the change. It wasn't the technology. It wasn't the new way of doing things. It wasn't the new values. It was actually people at the center of the change. It put the individual as the unit of change. And we can get fancy with all sorts of things like stakeholder analyses and action plans, but without the link back to the individual that needs to change, this will not get us the results we're looking for. And what we're really looking for is real change. So today I'm going to tee this up in two parts. We're going to do a foundational piece. So we'll go through ADKAR and have a look at it and try and understand this in some depth in terms of the building blocks. But then we're also going to look at application of it. So we're going to see how we apply ADKAR in making sense of change. How could this guide us in our change management work? And what about diagnosing gaps between what we would like and what's actually happening? Could it be used to measure progress in change? And how can this be used to enable leaders and managers? So ADKAR is the foundational model for us at AndChange and at ProSci. And while it can apply in so many ways, let's have a look at this from the perspective of trying to integrate, giving a context in the business sense. So contextually, change needs both the technical side and the people side. So we must design the change, build and deliver it. But we must also know that if people don't embrace and adopt it, we're not likely to get the results that we are looking for. We only get the results when we can put the two together, the technical side and that people side. And the change landscape is littered with all sorts of changes that are delivered on specs, but no one's using them. They don't deliver the actual success that we're looking for. And in times of change, success is dependent on both the technical and the people sides working together. Now, as a side note, when I talk about the technical side, I'm not really talking about technological change. Of course, technology change can be one of the elements, but this could apply to any change. Is it values, or is it new procedures, or are we moving to new premises, or indeed, have we moved to new premises because we're working virtually? So, change management, for me, it's a little bit like when you're in the theme park and you're going down the water slide. So change management is like water on that water slide. The water slide itself is the technical part of the change. And if you go down the slide without water, it can be pretty painful. Okay, so when we think about change, let's look at it from a different perspective here, sort of from the organizational view. And unfortunately, very often when we talk about change, we often talk about it at the 11,000 meter level, right, way up there. So I think, do me a favor, if you can jump to your chat box. You've got a chat box down at the lower side of the screen. Jump to your chat box, and in that screen, chat in what changes are you working on right now. No need for you to put the name, just what is the change that you're busy with right now. Nick will monitor those, and he'll read those out in a couple of moments from now. So go ahead while I'm chatting, chat in the changes that you are working on right now. The reality is that, changes happen up close. It's not at the 11,000 meter level. Everyone has to deal with how the change affects them personally. It's only when one transitions from that current state through that transition state to the future that we actually get to a change. And, we can lose people along the way. So we could get a situation, we're going through the transition, we've lost some people. But even when we get to the end, we could lose some people because they go back to their old habits. And, there's a lot of things we do by habit. So we can lose people along the way, and right at the end, we could end up with what we call here at AndChange and at ProSci, the Swiss cheese future state. Okay, so Nick, what do we get? What kind of changes are people working on?
Well, here's the good news. The good news is that there's definitely a lot of change out there. I've got everything from implementing ERP systems to going digital, working from home.
Yeah.
And a lot of these changes, in fact, are related to the very first question I did get, which is the best way to driving adoption in a digital world. But we can approach that particular question later in the Q&A section.
Sure.
In addition to that, there's also staggered working hours. Again, got to do with a new way of approaching
Yep.
work in general.
In general.
We've got the new normal post-COVID as well.
Yeah.
Quite an interesting change there. Moving to a new HR department, there's also the usual suspects like technologically and solution implementations, or adopting or moving to a
Great.
cloud, that sort of stuff,
Great.
introducing HR intranets.
Great.
It seems, though, that most of the changes have this this theme, this veil of having to move online, move more digital, and really interact
Yeah.
with the technology that you are
Great. Thank you.
that you need to work. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And thank you very much for chanting all of those in. And what I'm hearing from that is we've got multiple simultaneous changes. So we've got the changes that we were working on anyway, and now we've got more to work on. And there's also this theme coming through of, of using the technology, the networks, working from home, and so on. But with every one of these changes, we need to bring the people along with us. And and if that doesn't happen, there's going to be some consequences. There's consequences if not everybody is able to really participate and contribute. If, for example, they're working from home and they're still trying to do their jobs and still trying to work on the changes that we were planning anyway. So I'd like you to help me construct this. What are the consequences when people don't come along with the change? So here's another one of those polls. Okay, remember, go to menti.com. Okay, here, tangible consequences you've experienced when you don't get everyone to their future states. Okay, so what would the consequences be? What would be the effect of that? So just chat in, just a word or a short phrase. What are the consequences when you've experienced when we don't get everybody to come along? Okay, we're going to get resistance. Yeah, for sure. All right, here we're getting underperformance, documents not being properly managed. We're not getting the ROI. We're not getting the return on investment. That's why we're making the change. We're making the change for return on investment. Okay, resistance still coming out as the big one, the top, yes. Wow, look at that. Partial benefit realization, failure of the project, resignations. Yeah, we lose good people. Now, this is why I get really upset when people come to me and when I hear people saying, well, change management is the pink and fluffy thing. I don't think there's anything pink and fluffy about what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is hard. This is really hectic stuff that's going on and big impacts if people don't come along with us on the change. It's anything but pink and fluffy. So see what's happening here. Wow. So many things that can happen when we don't bring our people along with us. And that's why I really, really appreciate, and it resonates for me, the statement that Jeff Hyatt made in his book. He's right in the beginning of his book, where he says, the secret to successful change lies beyond the visible and the busy activities that surround change. Successful change, at its core, is rooted in something much simpler: how to facilitate change in one person. And I really find that this hits the button here. Yes, the activities like road shows and sending out the emails and the specification sessions are all good, but it's really not much unless we're bringing the individual along in the change as well. So in focusing on the individual, Jeff really introduced the ADKAR model as the way to help us work through this. And here is the ADKAR model. What is it? It's about 5 building blocks that we need to build in people if we want them to change. And you really notice what, the phrase I'm using there is building blocks. In my experience, what works is building people to change, not tearing them down. So what do these 5 letters really stand for? Well, the first A is awareness. It's awareness of the need for change. the awareness of the need that I need to make a change as a person needing to change, the desire to participate and support the change, the knowledge on how to change, and ability to implement the required skills and behaviors. And you can see there's a difference there already. In ability, we're really talking about the ability to implement it's doing. It's actually about doing the new thing, doing the new way. Reinforcement to sustain the change, to try and avoid that Swiss cheese kind of approach that we looked at earlier. So let's expand on this a little bit. Let's talk about awareness. Now, when we talking about awareness, awareness is like, it's the first step. It's us becoming aware that we need to do something differently. So this is driven by something. This is really very natural in us. It's really been around since we've been children of 2 years old. You know, when asked to change, the second reaction we have after saying no, of course, is why? And why? You remember the kids always asking why when they're tiny? And this why has found its way into a lot of business literature. If I look at Edgar Schein and Simon Sinek and the contemporaries of Jeff Hyatt, Connor and Cotter, all put this into their discussion and into their research about this is important and people need to know the why. And for leaders and sponsors of change, it's really about expressing the change. Now, there's some factors that we need to think about that could affect a person's awareness, like the view of the current state. Well, what does it look like right now? And how does this change relate to the way we're doing things right now? And what's our perception of the problem that we're trying to solve here? And also the credibility of the sender of that message of change could have an effect. It depends on who's sending it. Do we really believe them that we really have to go through this to make the change? So the risks also, you know, what if we don't change? What are the risks for me? What are the risks for the organization? So what awareness is not, is the awareness that the change is coming. A lot of people make that mistake. Even practitioners, seasoned practitioners, talking about, well, you know, we've told them that the change is coming. We've told them what the change is about. That's not what we talk. That's not what awareness is all about. Awareness is the realization that I'm being called to make a change. So let's try again. Let's share with us, please. What are some reactions that you have seen when we ask people to change and they don't know why? So if we're asking people to change and they don't know why, just in a single word or short phrase, what are some of the reactions you're going to get from those people? They don't know why they have to change, but we're asking them to. What reactions do we get? Remember, it's menti.com and use the code 20865, right? Yeah, the support is short-lived. So they may support the change now and then they'll go away from it. What other reactions could we get? Frustration and confusion. Yeah. And the what's in it for me is, it's if we don't explain the why, how can I know what's in it for me? And they'll be negative. Sure. The first reaction to change is no. I'm comfortable with where I am. I don't want to move. I don't want to change what I'm doing. Why should I do it? The why is really important. Getting to know that what's in it for me. And there could be, of course, confusion. Because if I don't know why we have to change, I may not even understand the change itself that well. So awareness is awareness of the need for us to change. Let's look at desire. For desire, this happens, of course, when somebody takes that first step towards going to the change. The first step is actually happening inside us. And this is the tricky part, because desire is not something that you can see and hear very easily, because it's happening within the person. And it can be determined by a number of different elements. It can be determined by, of course, the what's in it for me. Yeah, if there is a what's in it for me, then of course it's stronger. But there's also an organizational context to this. You know, to what degree are leaders influencing people? There may be a personal situation that is either helping me go towards this change or preventing me from going towards this change. And there could also be some intrinsic motivators. So, desire is about the part inside us that motivates us to come along with the change. And there could be internal motivators like the change is something I really believe should be happening. Or I have a tremendous regard for my leader and I really want to please my leader. I'm happy to work with my leader. And if he or she is asking me to make a change, then I'd want to do that. And those are the kinds of intrinsic motivators that help us come along with the change. And of course, that what's in it for me could be collective as well as individual. And what I've found is you really can't force people to change. You can't force the willingness to change. If you try to do that, the best we'll get is compliance, and it's really not what we're really looking for. So, I went looking around recently, talking about the sort of changes that are going on now. I went around looking recently to see what kind of signs are there to help us implement social distancing. All right, it's one of the changes we all have to make. So I went looking around. I'll be quite frank with you. I was quite disappointed. I didn't find a lot of signs that were building desire. You can see a couple of them there. They're kind of trying to impart knowledge, but they're not really telling us why, and they're not helping us want to feel part of the change. And there's some exceptions, of course. There's one, the governor of New York is pretty good at this. Every time he does a briefing, and that's every day, and it's really worth watching. He's really putting into his briefing something that helps people want to come along with social distancing, because it's really important, of course. And I got a little bit of a funny one that I found about that quarantine. There was a little kid having a first birthday party, putting up the sign that says, none of you are invited. So yeah, that's an interesting one there. So knowledge, the third element, the knowledge is about what to do, knowing what to do during the change and after the change. But of course, this knowledge does need context. If we need to know what to do, it's got to be contextualized by the awareness and the desire first. And there are some factors there. And factors could be, for example, how big is the gap between what I need to know and what I know already? And what is the knowledge, what is the base that we're working from? And what is my learning style and my capability? You could try to give me knowledge on mathematics. I'm not good at it. I never will. So it's got to do about the individual as well. And of course, what resources we have available. And what the default often is with change is the first reaction is, okay, send them on training and then they'll know what to do. And that's an unfortunate default. And, it reminds me of one of my favorite things that I like to say, if the only thing you've got in your hand is a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. So knowledge, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Without the context and the desire to change, we can't learn that knowledge. We wouldn't even want to. Now, knowledge, quite different from ability, because with ability, note that definition of ability. With ability, it's really about actually doing the new way. It's not being able to, like we sometimes use that word. It's actually doing it the new way, saying what needs to be said, doing the things that need to be done. And of course, there are some factors that will influence ability. And they could be psychological, there could even be physical blocks. I may not be tall enough, or I may not be small enough. I may not be light enough to be a jockey on a racehorse. So it doesn't matter how much I like horse racing. I'm just not going to be a jockey because I'm just not for it. So, ability can have these kind of limitations. And the availability of time and resources is quite important, because obviously that's about getting the coaching to be able to do it differently. So knowledge and ability are not the same. I can know what to do, but doing it is quite different. And the gap between knowledge to ability could be quite small, or it could be really big. And we would need to understand how big that gap is to see, so that we can help people close that gap and move from having just the knowledge to having the ability as well. The fifth element is reinforcement. And that's about reinforcing and sustaining the change. And the factors that could influence reinforcement there to sustain the change could be things like accountability, the accountability that we are giving to people to deliver on those results. Recognition of progress is really, really important. And I've seen this recognition coming out from leaders when they're actually showing and telling and recognizing people for the work they've done, even if they're not there yet, but they're making progress towards the change. So reverting back, of course, is natural, and we tend to go back. There's studies that show that the brain would much rather not want to process change. There's much more energy needed for the brain to process the change. So, we're likely not to want to change. So time and discussion, of course, will reinforce the first change, which is the change that has to take place in our mind about the change we need to make. And of course, things like recognition and rewards would help the second change, which is making the change come to life. So it's easy for us to revert back. So thinking about those factors, I'd like to ask you, what attributes do you think make reinforcement meaningful? So what are the things that we can do that makes, what's important about reinforcement to make it meaningful? For example, should this reinforcement make sense to us? Should it be authentic? Yeah, absolutely. Authenticity. Absolutely. The reinforcement must be authentic. We've got to feel that it's really being given to me and it's important. Walking the talk. Absolutely. Very good. Walk the talk. And to be consistent at doing that, not just doing it once, but constantly, always reinforcing. Sincerity there, visible rewards, giving rewards. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, communication, important element in that. Rewarding early. So rewarding early is about timing, right? So the timing of reinforcement is also important. Yeah. Visible, should be visible. Yeah, visible to others. It reinforces the group when they are seeing that recognition is being given to those who are making that change, who are doing the change. Yeah, acting on the feedback. Yes, so the feedback's important. We'll do something about that. That is reinforcing the people to come along with the change. So thank you. There's quite a lot there. There's quite a lot of different things that are important about the way in which we do the reinforcement that will affect that'll have an effect on how good it is and how it's working. Great. Yeah, walking the talk. That's a favorite of mine. Rewarding early, I think, is also important. Routine. Yeah, that consistency. Good. Thank you very much for this engagement. So, we'll take a look at some real examples to connect that with us. And the one that I really enjoy is walking around and listening to what people say, listening to what they say. So, you're hearing people say, well, I understand why I need to do this change. Sounds like they've got the awareness. I know how to do this. I'm able to do it. Okay, I've decided to come along with the change. That's really making a difference. And there are various triggers, of course, for building this. There are various triggers. With awareness, it's about the why. Why now? What will happen if I don't change? What's the effect to me? With ability, it's about what are the barriers to can I take these barriers away from me? What capacity do we have to doing this? And what mechanisms do we have and measurements? Reinforcement, very powerful. If we can measure how we're doing. So the triggers can be really important. And there's an organizational context for ADKAR as well, of course. I've got to build ADKAR if we're going to be changing a person. But if we've got a group of people, a team of people of 5, each one is going to be building their own ADKAR in time. Or it's 20 people, or it's 1,000 people. It could be a division of your organization or a department, or it could indeed be the whole organization. So these ADKARs have to be built at an individual level. But there's more organizational context here too. Because if we look at change, people are changing at different paces. We don't all change at the same speed. You take the case of new technology, for example, digitization. You know, you could have the situation where one person has invested the last 10 years of their life becoming absolutely experts in the current way in which we're doing stuff. But you compare that with somebody else in the organization who actually hates the way we're doing stuff today. Why? Because they recently joined us, and the place that they were working at before they came here was doing it differently and was doing it in a much more effective way. And you can imagine just how different those two ADKAR assessments would be. And so we are different as we go through the change. The change itself could be affecting us. It could be something to do with the context around the change, either in the organization or maybe even personally. So we have to understand that we're not all going to change at the same pace. And therefore, we're going to have to work with people individually if we want them to change. And of course, when we are missing some of the elements, there could be some symptoms that come out. You know, if people are missing the awareness and the desire, we're likely to get people asking the same questions over and over, or you may have people not sharing information with one another. We could even see the delays in implementation. Whereas, you know, if we've got the lack of knowledge or ability, we're going to get into what I call the expensive re's. We're going to have to keep retraining people, giving them more coaching, greater impact on customers. They'll start to feel the effects of our people not actually knowing what to do and not even doing it. And if there's, you know, some missing reinforcement, of course, people can revert back to the old ways of doing it. They've learned the new way, but then they'll revert back to the old way. So ADKAR provides for us these milestones for our change. And it allows us to work with people and understand when they've reached these milestones as well. So let's shift gear here. Let's visit how we can apply ADKAR. And we're going to look at applying ADKAR in a number of different applications. So the first one is really about making sense of the change. It's about helping people make this change less fuzzy for them. And change is very challenging. We know that. So we need something to help us focus us on the change. And we can have this conversation in terms of awareness and desire. And on the right, you'll see some quotes that clients and practitioners have made about seeing the value of using ADKAR to help people make sense of the change. You know, it's easy to use ADKAR, distills the change process in the most basic yet critical elements. So it's about putting some structure to the conversation that we have about change. And we've heard people talk about how they use this not only at work, but they're also using it at home. Well, you know, this is pretty good. This applies, you know, in my relationship with my children and getting them to do the kinds of things that I'd like them to do, or even with my partner. So it's not just a work-related thing. It can also certainly be personal too. So what about the why and the what? When we're looking at guiding the work we do, and here the aim here is to link the outcomes desired with the actions that we need to take to achieve those outcomes. So we need to understand the why and the what of the change, and what are we trying to achieve. And we know if we had a meeting, we had a meeting about the change, but why did we have it? What is this trying to achieve with us? So we can relate ADKAR to the kinds of actions that we are taking. And you could see that various activities, the sponsor roadmaps relating to the actions that sponsors, senior executives are taking, good for building awareness, desire, and reinforcement. Communications, good for awareness and reinforcement. Coaching, what managers are expected to do with their people, very powerful in all elements of ADKAR. Training, of course, can be it's good for the knowledge, can even, if it's structured nicely, be good for the ability building as well. And of course, resistance management, bringing the heart along, creating the desire to change. So that's how we would link ADKAR to the activities we're doing. It also helps us understand the when. So when we look at this when element, the ADKAR milestones describe the individual progress that's being made, how the individual is progressing along, and the need to align with it, and the need to align this with the life cycle of the change itself. So there's a number of ways of looking at this, and this is one particular way of describing the life cycle of the change. It's a kind of a project approach. It's a standard project life cycle. You're probably, you may be using a different life cycle descriptors, but they are basically the same. The plan, the design, the develop, and the deploy. So at the beginning of when we get to the deployment, we would really want our ability to be right. You'd want the people to be actually doing it differently, behaving differently at the time when we start deploying the change. So now what we do is we've aligned ability to that. We just need to work back and to the other elements to get us to the ability. Of course, we know we're going to have to build the awareness, the desire, and the knowledge as we go along. So we can work back to that and, of course, work forward to bringing the reinforcement on board to sustain. So the unfortunate reality, of course, is that it doesn't always work like that. The unfortunate reality is that often, it works like, well, we'll receive an email on Monday to attend some training on Wednesday for a go live on Thursday. And that we can see why that isn't going to work, because we're trying to just pack everything into a short space of time. We're not giving people the chance to actually come along with this change. So what's better to ask is, at what date would we need to achieve the particular milestone so that we will be ready and have the ability at the time we go live? That's actually called planning, isn't it? So we would want to do that. Now, we could also, of course, another view of this, that's a sort of that's a kind of waterfall type of approach, but another view of this could be, how does this relate to Agile? Because Agile now is a very popular way for making change. And this is an area where we have researched quite a lot. And from a change management perspective, there's a specific research report that's available on change management and Agile. And we will run integrating Agile change management workshops. We run these workshops. The next workshop we're going to be running is, it's a one-day program. We're going to be running the next workshops in July, but it could be earlier depending on the demand. And it's, of course, planned to be a virtual workshop. So, we'll be delivering that virtually, which is also, of course, available for practitioners, executives, managers. So yeah, we can actually look at that. And if we map that one out, when we look at the managing the change from an Agile perspective, the visual of this is, well, we're going to be splitting out. You have to split ADKAR across the life cycle there. So we'll be doing the awareness and the desire building at the initiative level, but as you go through each release, we're going to be running ADKAR for each release, because each release, of course, provides a change. And then ultimately, we're going to need to sustain that. We're going to need to reinforce that. So the workshop, of course, I've covered this in half a minute, but the workshop we run goes into the detail of how you integrate this with the individual and the organizational sense of the change. Third application that we could think about for ADKAR is the diagnosing of gaps. And this is the gaps between what the person needs to be doing or needs to be at right now and where they are. And we do this in a kind of a graphic way. We use a graphic descriptor here to define the barrier point. We call this the barrier point. And the barrier point, of course, would be the first element in the ADKAR profile that scores and that is too low, if you like, is too weak for the person to make progress in the change. And it shows us, in fact, where we must focus our energy right now. And of course, each individual could be different, and we could have different barriers. If you look at the top right, the one on the top right, you could say, well, there's actually a couple of barriers here, but there's desire is a barrier too. Yes, desire is a barrier, but the one we want to focus on right now is awareness, because it's the first element. If you're going from left to right, it's the first element that is not scoring high enough. And the person needs more awareness before we really can tackle the desire part of it. So The barrier points tell us where we can focus, and that's really useful because that's where we're going to apply our energy. That's where we're going to do the work. And of course, it can be very frustrating for employees that, where they keep getting the wrong message about the change. They're really looking perhaps for the reason why they should change, and everybody's talking about how to do it and giving them the manuals on how to do it and giving them the app, and they're like, why must I even do this? So the barrier point is really effective at limiting that and making sure that we're focusing on the most important part. You'll remember that Monday email example. I'm not even aware that I need to change, and I'm being asked to change. So that, and I'm being asked to go and build the knowledge. Of course, that's not going to work. The fourth way in which we can apply ADKAR is to measure progress. Because ADKAR is describing building blocks for successful change, and because it is sequential, it's not linear, but there is a sequence to it, I can measure where we are on the journey and set some thresholds. And you'll see the quotes on the right are from some practitioners who are using us in this context where they're using ADKAR to set the thresholds. And we build ADKAR, we do this, and we've gone ahead and built a dashboard, which is a sort of cloud-based survey that allows you to have an aggregate view of a group of people going through the change. This is, of course, one way of doing it, but you could measure what people are saying. Remember, we looked at what people were saying. That's another way of measuring where are we in this journey, and where are the people in this journey of change. So it's not only about the individual. You could even use ADKAR in the sort of group context as well. And then finally, what about ADKAR being used to enable managers and leaders? Enabling leaders in the organization, really, really important. And the research is really clear on this. Senior leaders and frontline managers are the voices of change. It's from these people that employees want to hear the message of change. And ADKAR can be a very powerful tool for change leaders to use. In fact, anyone helping unlock a barrier in another person is a change leader, not just managers, anyone doing that. And it's for this reason that every program we run for key roles in the organization, be it executives or managers or the project managers, project team, the practitioners, the HR, business partners, specialists, even employees, all of them contain ADKAR. And in this way, you actually end up creating a common language of change. And when we start creating that common language of change, that's when we unlock the resilience like you've never seen before. We've seen this go on. So let me do one or two bonus ones for you. Of course, one of them is around creating different plots of ADKAR. And I've gone through two of them with you before, the sort of agile and the waterfall, but there's many different ones that we're starting to use, and it's quite exciting when you mapping ADKAR to a participatory change, or you're mapping ADKAR to Lean or to Six Sigma, or all sorts of different ways of mapping ADKAR to programs. And people have found this really powerful because it helps them link the changes that they're trying to make with the individuals that are making the change. This connects the human with any kind of change that we could be making in the organization. The second one is I've teed up for you especially today, and that's about the effect of the pandemic. Let's think about that for a minute. I mean, today we are faced with shared change challenges like never before. We've got all of this stuff going on as a result of the pandemic while we're trying to make other changes ourselves. And this is the kind of situation that we're in right now. And this is happening on top of all the other changes. So for example, as individuals at home within our own workspaces, virtual or real, for us, how could we help others adopt a new way of behavior? So as an example, these are some of the in-depth ADKAR questions that we could be helping people with? You know, what is it like? What is the nature of this social distancing like? Why do I need to practice it? You know, what are the personal motivators for this social distancing? And this would be the kind of conversation that would help people connect with the change and understand what they need if they want to continue doing this and being successful at doing this. What do I like that one in knowledge. What do I need to unlearn? Yeah, what stuff must I unlearn? We have to unlearn shaking of hands, right? And unlearn certain behaviors before we can even adopt the new ones. So there's a couple of questions there. I'm sorry, writing's a little small on this one, but I just wanted to share with you, there's so many questions we could be asking people. So a whole lot of people have been talking to us about this, social distancing, political leaders, scientists, religious leaders, but it's, yeah, we may be even parenting our parents through this kind of thing. So these kind of questions could be useful. So it's really important that we now define an actual change that we want to help people make. And as we move from this total lockdown situation to coexisting with the virus, our living and working lives will still not return to what it was, 6 months ago or last year. It may never go back to that old norm. So working from home is a condition. It's not a result. It's a condition that we need to work with. But what's the change journey individuals need to make given this condition? So the challenge here we can help people with is how to perform well as a remote team member, for example. So if that's the result we're looking for, how do I perform better or well as a team member? Now, let me ask you this. What are the biggest mindset, attitudes, or critical behavior changes for employees to succeed at this kind of change? What do you think would be the biggest mindset, attitudes, critical behavior changes to get people in on this? What could that be? All right. See if has anybody got some ideas on that? What are the biggest mindset changes? Yeah, clear communications, discipline at it, providing people confidence, absolutely. Yep, encouraging them and so on. Great, good. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll be feeding this back to personal leadership. It's about the personal leadership, okay? Feeling well equipped to do it, being visible, so we can be visible even if we're not in the same room. Lots of different behavioral changes for people to succeed at this working from home. Great, thank you so much for sharing that. I know we're running a little tight on time, so I'm gonna move it on, and I'm just gonna ask you to I'm gonna set one quick question for you. Knowing all of this, how will you use ADKAR in the next week? Okay, so how could you leverage ADKAR in the next week to help your changes, to help someone change, even to help ourselves change? What would you use? How will you use ADKAR in the next week? You can chat in. Some ideas about what you're going to be doing. Is it about how you're going to be communicating? Is it going to be the kind of conversations that you're going to have with your people if you're a leader? Use it in a job search, okay? Cool. Yeah, let's remember not to jump to the training without preparing for it. Absolutely. You could assess your people. Yes, there are tools. ADKAR is not just a model. There's a tool that's been developed from that. Be more visible with my people. Absolutely. I wrote a post on that just the other day about, the challenge that leaders have now. We actually have to be more visible with our people in lockdown than before. It's about making sure they still feel connected to us. Making the change steps more practical. Thank you. That's really great. That's really good. Okay. For a lot of you, this is maybe a re-exposure when it comes to ADKAR, but for some of you, it's new stuff. It's the power in the results that we can get. There's all sorts of great ideas. Thank you very much. Of course, this webinar will be posted to the AndChange YouTube site for replay in the next day or so. So you don't have to try and make notes of this. You can come back and have a look at this at your leisure. So while you're chatting this out, and you may have some questions along, I'd like to just share with you, I was talking about earlier that all our programs have ADKAR somewhere in them, and we've got a number of different programs that are available to help people in different roles in organizations. We've got some introductory programs, e-learning and the fundamentals of change management. Then for the various roles like executives, we've got a sponsor workshop, change managers, there's a certification program, which of course many of you have already taken. Project teams, there's a delivering project results. Managers, there's even employees, there's a program that helps them manage take responsibility for manage their own change. And there's of course some workshops as well at various levels. All of these end up and talk about the changes in your organization in one language. And this is really the big thing that makes a difference. All right, I'm going to open up for a question session now. Thank you all. If you've got any questions, chat them out in the chat box. And Nicholas will, just let's hear some of the questions that have come through, Nicholas. Any questions that have come through we can discuss?
So, like I mentioned earlier, there's still the pending question, which I believe is linked in some small way to the questions that we've been seeing and the changes that we've been seeing crop up inside the chat box itself. And you can all view it by jumping into the Q&A section yourselves and submitting a question. Please do so now. But primarily, it's what is the best way to drive adoption in a digital world? I believe in part that this question as it relates to ADKAR is, does ADKAR serve as the best way to drive adoption in a digital world? And how would you apply ADKAR in a digital environment to do that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and thank you for that. So a couple of things come to mind, and it's coming out of the experience I've had with working with organizations in that space. One of the first things is to make sure that we clearly define what the change is. You know, I can't build awareness in somebody that they need to change and why they should change until we understand what that change is. And very often I've found that, you know, the people are talking about, well, we're going to go digital. We're digitization. We're all going to go. And then, you know, what does that really mean? So the challenge there is to take our leadership and our project teams through the process that gets them to define what that change really means. And it may mean different things for different people, because the digitization that we're doing could look different to different people in different roles in the organization. So I would say the first thing is make sure that we are really clear on what the change is and what change we are asking people to make. And then ADKAR, absolutely, very powerful for that, because you want to go through with people and have them understand why they need to change. So why is digitization necessary? And of course, from the desire side, it's going to be, well, we have to answer the questions. Will digitization impact my job? And so how? You know, is this a risk to me? What do I need to do to adapt to this? Do I have to change what I'm doing? Do I have to learn new things? Is my job at risk? We have to answer those questions, because, you know, guess what? If they don't answer, people will answer them for us. And of course, they may dream up the answers, and they may not be the answers we want. So absolutely, ADKAR, digitization, absolutely essential. But make sure we've got the change clearly defined. Any others, Nick?
Yes, the questions are just starting to roll on in now.
Cool.
The first and foremost, and I guess it's related to this whole discussion about operating in a digital world, is any suggestions for rewards during working from home?
Okay, so so, you know, that's actually a very good one, because, you know, rewarding people in the context of working from home, I think what we may find is that the values have changed a little bit. And I was seeing people saying things like, you know, the challenge that I've got of working from home, the moment I get near that computer, I'm at work. And it's now starting to become really, really important that people are respecting some time that I should have, some personal time that I should have for myself. So a reward to someone could actually give them more time away from their laptops, away from their computers, away from their phones, so they could actually interact and work and be with their families in a true sort of home situation. So, I think a great reward too, and that's a lesson I learned as a manager. A great reward I can give my people is actually not to bug them too much, and be a little bit structured about the way in which we're interacting with our people while they're working from home. Could be one of the rewards that we give them. And of course, recognition. So that means about getting people together in a big group session, having them all turn on their webcams and then talk to the people and let them see each other and recognize people in that group situation is another reward that you could give to people when you can't actually, hand them something. And of course, another reward could be giving them some sort of safety and security in this kind of lockdown situation, of course, could help.
So another couple of questions are flowing on through the Q&A section as well as the chat.
Right.
There's two here that are very similar to each other. I'll just read them both out.
Okay.
I have, say, 10,000 users. How best to find out where in ADKAR each of them individually stand, especially considering the surveys get about a 10% response rate?
Sure.
The other question is, the lockdown was rather unexpected, giving us time to communicate in detail why employees will be working from home. How do we check the level of awareness or alternatively implement ADKAR in this case? In cases, I assume, where, and in cases, I assume, and this is me interpreting the question, where, there isn't that time frame to build the awareness and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Both of these questions almost speak to the same thing. Yes?
I think they are linked, Nick. I think they really are linked, and they're linked in this way. If you've got 10,000 people that are undergoing a change, and you're also in the situation where you can't actually get to see these people, it's not that easy. It's not let's put it this way, not in the traditional ways in which we do it, and surveys don't get but I think the first most important thing to do is to take those 10,000 people and remember that 30,000, that 10, 11,000 meter view I was talking about. We got to come out of that 11,000 meter view. We've got to get closer to them, and we need to start understanding what groupings do we have. Let's group our people in the way in which the change is impacting them. It may not be department lines, it may be job role lines, but let's put these groups together. And then we can look at an individual group. We could create groups and we could have group interactions. I mean, I've seen some pretty effective Zoom type meetings where groups of people are impacted by the change in the same way, are getting together and discussing the change, raising the questions, and of course, having people come into that meeting who can answer those questions, the managers, the technical experts, the HR people. But we're having groups of people, and my favorite thing, listen to what they say. That'll tell you where the heart is. That'll tell you the level of awareness. So we could ask a general question like, do we know what's not changing? Could somebody tell me what's not changing about the way we do our work right now? Those kind of questions can lead one to understand the level of awareness that people have that they need to change, and so on. So you can have it in a group situation, but of course it's always useful to have the ability and give the option of people to talk to their leaders on a one-on-one basis. So I think actually using some of the technologies we've got today, even if we're working from home, having these one-on-one conversations on WhatsApp with my people, I've got that. I've got every one of my people linked to me on a personal basis, and of course we have a group one as well, so that we can do this work of interacting with them, even though we're working from home. So for that last question, for me, Nick, it's about more communication, not less. It's about more opportunity that we're giving our people to work with us and for us to help them and explain to them. So the role a change manager can have in this, is to activate these networks, make sure that the people who can answer the questions, the executives, the managers, are actually in touch. In fact, there's some sessions that I've seen run where it's actually easier now for an executive to pop in to a group session at the end of the session or at the beginning of the session, and just say some things and then go. They'll disappear after 60 seconds. Hey, that's really that's a really fantastic way to get executives in. I don't have to book quarter of an hour, half an hour in the diary. They can just pop in as long as they know what's going on and what the people are busy talking about. So some ideas
Right.
there.
So yeah, there's plenty of ideas,
Yeah.
and there's also still plenty of questions. Unfortunately, we are slowly but surely running out of time.
Running out of time.
So
yeah.
I'm going to have to reduce the number of questions to kind of get down to the essence of it. And
Hey,
I
but
will
people can
try
always
and get back
contact
to
us,
you.
right? Yeah, they can always
Absolutely.
contact us, Nick. They can always
Please,
stay in
everyone,
touch with us.
feel free to contact me at nicholas@anchange.com, or you can contact Tom at tom@anchange.com. We will both be very happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we'd love to hear
In
from
addition to that, though, maybe on a final question, and I've kind of condensed a couple of the questions I've seen come in into one larger question.
you. Okay.
So there's a lot of questions around recommending an implementation of a change in organizations that are very widespread across continents or across trust lines specifically. And whether or not the success factor, especially in those cases, are primarily with management or can be employee driven or driven at the employee level in terms of defining the success of the change management effort there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's a lot of those kinds of questions coming through. Maybe you could provide some insight there.
Well, I think this comes to a sort of a wrap up kind of comment that I was going to make anyway, which is, as we go through this period of great change, and we're constrained in some ways in which we do that. And like, for example, when you're spread out all across the globe on a thing like this, it's absolutely possible for you to get leaders to be leaders without necessarily being in the ranks of leaders. So absolutely, you can get change networks, super users, call them what you like, champions of the change. They can be in amongst us as part of the teams. It's about empowering them to be able to have these conversations with their colleagues about the change, so that they've got the information, they've got the support if there are questions that everybody's coming up with that they can't deal with. So absolutely, and I think that change practitioners, this is now our time as change management practitioners. This is the time for us to step up to the plate and actually be the helpers that we've always wanted to be. We even now more than ever before can be helpers to people who need to change. So it's not about, it's not about having the rank. It's not about having the title. It's about us being ready to help people through the change, and in a sense being, empathetic to the situation that they're in right now. Okay, so I hope that's helped. I just want to wrap. I think we need to wrap now because of the timing, and I thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Nick and Jovan, for helping me out in this webinar here this afternoon. Thank you all for joining me here today on the call. Remember why we got into this. We got into this because we are people, right? So help those around you and help them change. That's what's going to build a better world. So I look forward to seeing you on our next webinars. The next webinar we're going to be running is in 2 weeks from today. And we're going to be talking about some really important stuff like the case for change management. One of the big challenges for all change practitioners today is, why should we even be doing this? What's the value of it? What value can we deliver for this? Of course, you can get more information by visiting our website. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Thank you very much for giving me of your time. I hope you found some of this stuff useful, and I really look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So thank you very much, and be safe. Stay safe and be safe. Wear the mask. Cheers.